success young. Like you won the short film Palme d'Or. And I like yes, give it that's a big deal. And I don't know. And as someone who made that a thing that like got popular when I was 29, I'm constantly having a waking nightmare that I'll wake up at 50, like angry and sad, and that the biggest thing I did, I won the award for at 29. Was that part of the driving factor in building out this character, or was it something else?
You mean the Palme d'Or?
No, not specifically winning the short for Palme d'Or, but just like thinking about like people who had success young and being someone who had success young. Like, was there ever this feeling that like that might be all there was, and that there would be this version of yourself in the future that's like upset and looking at young filmmakers with both contempt and like sort of joy?
I don't know. I don't see myself as like I had success young in a way. Like well, the thing with the Palme d'Or was like I was 28. And it was a bit crazy for me because I was used to that, but eventually that didn't change my life really. Because when you have these films on Canon, things like that, it doesn't necessarily change your life. You still have the same regular life, especially in Colombia. I had my same normal life, and I was when I made this film because I was actually frustrated about cinema because it's hard to make these films, this type of films, and when I made my first film, this is my second film, I have this frustration about cinema that is so hard. I'm also a producer of this film and my first film. And when you're young, you're so reckless and you don't care about earning a life, you just care about making cinema. But then I was 30 something and I struggled a lot with my first film and I'm also a professor. That's actually, I've been living more out of being a professor at university there in Colombia. And as you grow old, that energy of the youth is difficult to keep
Absolutely.
it. You know, and you start thinking about adulthood and a house or a family and now that dream becomes a bit more difficult and it's a bit stressing to make films, you know, like so I was from my frustration of how my first film was like it's like being unemployed really like and the Palme d'Or thing it didn't change anything, you know. I was still taking the same bus and everything and so I decided to make a film thinking if I leave behind this dream and I just gonna be a full-time professor and forget about that uneasiness of cinema, what kind of professor would I become in 20 years if I give up? Like I will be this alcoholic or bohemic. Like I'm gonna make a film probably about the worst version of myself in 20 years, and probably it's gonna be like this. But at the beginning, I thought like I don't want to make a film about a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And I was a bit obsessed with these poets from Medellin, from my city, these dreamers, because poets are like dreamers. They think highly of themselves when you see them in the parks in Medellin and the libraries, coffees. And this is how I feel, this obsession with making films, but also this frustration of not thinking about what security, stability, and all these things. So that was my idea back then, and that's why I make this film about my own frustrations as an artist in the context of my city, of my life, and in a way in order to not become that person in 20 years, I decided to play again with cinema, to reconnect with my young self. So it's weird because I did this film about my future self
Me in 20
in order
years.
to reconnect with my younger self.
Yeah. No, it's actually kind of funny too, because like, that anxiety is an anxiety that like, we all have at a certain age or a certain like, like the moment you could get into a different income bracket. And oftentimes you meet writers or filmmakers or, people who work in the arts, the idea is to make the most commercial thing possible. And yet you decided to focus on the people that make the least commercial art form ever, which are poets, right? And you also did it in this really idiosyncratic, poetic way. Like I'm so enthralled with your editing and your editing style. And I think one brief question I had for you was like, what poet do you think this movie looks like or moves like? Like, what rhythms does this poet? What poet does this film mimic? Because it doesn't feel like a Silva poem. I read a bunch. I read Nocturne 3. I read like a bunch of other Silva poems. I wasn't as familiar with him as I am with Marquez, and I was like, oh, it doesn't feel like that. So, was there something you were drawing from?
Well, for me, poetry is a pretext to talk about myself in a way. Like I was in, rather than poetry, I was more interested in the poets in a more kind of like anthropological way, to depict my own dilemmas as an artist. And with this rhythm, what I was trying to do is not trying to going away from what I did before, from the preconception of, because we in a way in places like Colombia we tend to create forms that are very familiar as a Colombian cinema or Latin American cinema, and I'm part of that as well as a Colombian filmmaker, and I was trying to just make something weird that I was trying to avoid references in that, to do something that was free, most of it, mostly free and strange. And I found in this aesthetic, which is not, I mean, there's a lot of films with this aesthetic, but to do something that it was new to me, that's why I created that. And I was thinking more like, rather than a poet, probably about music. I like this idea because in a way I wanted to do a film that talks to the audience as well, because it's part of the concept of the film. It talks about art and how we create art and the dilemmas around art and how we, for who we make art. And in Colombia, we struggle a lot with audiences. Like our house cinema doesn't really have an audience because we get away from them. So for me, it was actually more resilient. How do you say that word? I don't know.
You got it right.
Yeah, to make something not commercial really, but popular.
Yeah.
And for me, it was more close. The editing was more close, like to Colombian traditional music, like popular music. So I want the film to be popular in the way that traditional music is. Like in Colombia, we have like cumbia, like or vallenato, which is, and people love that. They dance, and we all hear that, and it's beautifully made. It's art. It's beautiful art, and I wanted the film to feel like that, like a piece of popular art, that people will enjoy watching.
The first act has that. It has that sense that like your drunk uncle grabs you. It's like, you're dancing with me, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'm here. And he's like breathing on you heavy, and you're like, well, how did I end up on this side of the room?
Yeah, and if you see the screenplay is also like music. You go this way, and then you go this, and you go up and down, and suddenly you are in the chorus or things like that. I was thinking more like this kind of structure of a crazy song, like a crazy, like the music itself. Like it's a bit like a poetry music with these winds, but also a bit crazy, like in the head of this person,
Yeah. It's actually really, this has been the year of father-daughter movies. Like, there's been so many, like Sentiment of Value, One Battle After Another. I'm sure I'm missing 3 other ones, but there were a lot of really beautiful movies about like this sort of like tender, complex, like dads not knowing how to be good dads. And I really was touched by the sort of surrogate fatherhood and mentorship that happens with, is it Yolandi?
Your lady.
Yeah, with this young woman and also with his own daughter and like their reconnection through his like sort of surrogacy with her. Can you tell me about creating this character and also
I mean, your lady.
your lady, yeah, and also his like the actual daughter as well.
Well, for me, it was interesting because I made a few films before with characters that are non-actors, and I made a few films with girls as main actresses, and I was funny because in these films I felt like as I was Oscar and my actresses were like your lady. I had this relationship because we also have in Colombia this tradition of working with non-actors, and there's some dilemma that we face by doing that, you know, and I think that was the first thought about that, how we approach, because in cinema or in my society Colombian films we tend to portray the other, you know. So by putting the mirror on myself, I'm portraying myself. I'm putting the camera on me, you know, in a way. So I for me, your lady was the tool to depict those dilemmas that I face when I create cinema, you know, or art. I mean, and I, for me, this film is therapy. You know, when you make a film, it's therapy, and you see, when I see the film, is talking about myself all the time. It's like this dilemma that I had with frustration about cinema and stuff. When I started doing this film, I thought I want to do comedy because I want to enjoy the process of doing that, and I want to get rid of this nihilistic idea of suffering while you make art, because it's so difficult and you're always thinking about that. So I want to do something that you enjoy doing and laugh about it, and also you find light in the process and get rid of this obsession with recognition, or because we are narcissistic as well as artists, like with this idea, this utopian idea of recognition or validation, and just enjoying the process was enjoying the everyday life. You know, that's my own process as an adult and I'm growing up, and your light for me is myself as well, like finding the true light on the process of making art, you know. Like everywhere I see in the film, I see reflection as an artist, as a Colombian, as a man, as everything, you know. And through comedy, because comedy allows me to laugh about everything, you know, and I think it's important to laugh in the dystopian world we're living today. But I need to go back to the question. Yeah, so your lady was that the way I could portray that idea that I have, and the father-daughter relationship. I'm not a father, and I'm old now. I don't know if I'm going to be a father, but I think in Colombian society, because we are a society of absent fathers, I think most of us in Colombia, many of us don't have children because we are afraid of replicating the same issues we had with our parents. So I always have this dilemma with parenthood, or with this, like if I'm going to replicate this situation of being absent, you know, is so I think at the end it's important for me and for many people that I've talked to in Colombia, for instance, about this idea of this kind of father, you know, like that many of us have.
100%. Absent Dad Club here. I was really also sort of like I watch a lot of movies. I mean, like I hope I do. There's too many, but I watch a lot, and oftentimes I feel like there isn't as much of like a clear contextualized like racial discourse in movies not made in America, right? Like I feel like there's oftentimes like this sort of like push away or whatever, but your film, like especially for a Colombian film, a Latin American film, like really like looked at race really head on in a really beautiful way. And I wonder, like, you know, I think hearing about you talking about like the way in which like there's a sort of like excitement to like photograph the other inside of Colombian filmmaking. They're in. I'm giving you a compliment, which is basically like I was very impressed that you like asked these questions out of your movie, and I wonder what the conversation in Colombia has been about some of those questions being asked in the movie, because I don't think that I think that in America, Westerners or I mean, Americans and like people in Europe would probably flatten everything in Colombia to just like Latin, and like that complexity wouldn't be as loud in our criticism of the film.
Well, I think the most important for me in that discussion is the way to find freedom in the way we make films or art in general, because we are when we make films or art in Colombia, we are kind of pushed to do the same subjects in a way, which is important. I mean, it's good to make films that are important in many ways, but at the same time, there's something about art that becomes kind of opportunistic. That I think sometimes you don't have the choice to do what you want to do because you are drawn by this world of like even the art becomes part of a system of an industry, and sometimes you don't have that freedom to do whatever you like. So when you come from Colombia, of course it's like when we were pitching or financing this film and presenting the films to the funds and stuff to get the money. It's like this is a film about a comedy about poets in Colombia and father-daughter relationship, and then they were saying like, but where is Colombia here? Of course the film didn't exist back then.
See Cocaine one. Oh, actually I did. There's one scene
something like that. It's like your lady. She just want to write about a tree. Like this is, and sometimes these discussions about things that are important doesn't necessarily is what she really wants to tell. It's just having the freedom. Sometimes we lack the freedom to do what we want to do because we have to think about who is the audience for that, who is the market for that, and so I think that was important for me. It doesn't mean that it's not. It is important to. I mean, and for me, I think I'm not against any kind of film or story or theme or whatever. It's as long as you want to do that, But we also can tell many other things that are important for us, So it was like shouting to the world of the arts to say, let's try and make and have freedom to create what we want to create.
It's beautiful. I think we're going to ask some questions to the audience, but I have one quick one for you, one last one. Sorry, I'm greedy, so let me be greedy. Can you tell me how you cast this movie? Because I'm so impressed by this cast. Everyone was amazing. Everyone looked amazing. It was like everything was pitch perfect.
It's a great casting team. The team, John, the casting director, and his team was amazing. We wanted to have a lot of the main actor to be professional actor, and I did a lot of tests on professional actors. But we also did a casting on the characters from that universe of poetry because we wanted to create this sense of realism on the poetry world, like a documentary. And because the main character was so demanding for an actor, a lot of dialogues, action stuff. So I spent a lot of time looking for an actor, but in the process, a friend of mine sends me this Facebook profile of the husband of his auntie, saying like this can be one of those poets in the universe of poetry, and he was Uweimar, and I saw him. My first impression was no, this is not my poem, but my poet, but he can be maybe he's one of those poets around. And we did a test for him, and I kept these videos. These videos are very useful for me in the writing process. And once I saw this video, I was it changed. I mean, it changed everything for me. Like my perception in the script of the character wasn't like that. I mean, it was probably less. It was more serious, more less comical. Let's say it was different. And when I saw him, it's like, is this my poet really? Like I was thinking about that, and I kept looking for professional actors, but I kept on watching this video of him, and then I started stalking him, and he had this YouTube channel where he, because he's a professor in philosophy, and during the pandemic he created a YouTube channel to give classes, and he was amazing, like in these videos, the way he talks, the way he moves, it was amazing. And it was a risk, I mean, but we did another test, and he was good, and it was like an accident, you know, these magical accidents that happens in cinema that are beautiful, and it was a risk, like everything in the film, like, because we had this idea of freedom, like risk everything and try things and stuff. So I decided I give him the character, because it wasn't like that, and he changed it, and I think he made it more humble, he gave a lot of empathy to the character that wasn't on the script, really. It's one of the things that the actor really changed. Not the structure of the script, but it changed the character and the technicality, the specificities of the way he speaks, the way he moves, runs, the posture, everything is him, you know, like. And he went to a process of 2 months of preparation and everything, and to learn the techniques, the technicalities of being an actor, and what he did was massive. He quit his life for 2 months or 3 months, and he was so committed, and even we were afraid, because there was a lot of physical action and things running and stuff, and he was a 56-year-old, no exercise at all. He was doing a lot of stuff. We were like, oh, we had to hire a help. How do you call this? A nurse.
Health and safety, yeah.
To be there. Like, it was a huge job for him.
It was so impressive. Okay, you had one. Oh, great, fantastic. Okay, you're closest.
Okay, so sorry first with the people who only speak English, but I'm gonna say something in Spanish and then I'm gonna try to say it in English. Simón, parce, muchas gracias. Parce, muchas gracias por hacer esa película, porque la verdad muestra arte diferente a lo que es Colombia. Muestra lo que muchos queremos en alguna manera, ver que otras personas conozcan a Colombia. Entonces creo que la forma de hacer la película muestra una cara diferente que casi nadie muestra de que es Colombia, y que algunas personas queremos pues mostrar, ¿cierto? Ya se me olvidó lo otro que iba a decir. La pregunta realmente es quiero hacer varias preguntas. Quiero hacer varias preguntas en una para que me conteste. Primero, si tomó inspiración de algún poeta. Por ejemplo, un amigo me decía aquí, que él decía que de pronto él vio reflejado como Horacio Quiroga, ¿cierto? Y yo diría más que todo como la desgracia de lo que es ser un artista, sobre todo en este tiempo contemporáneo. No solamente en el arte de hacer cine, sino en general el que quiere hacer arte. Muchos, digamos, queremos defender una autenticidad del arte, ¿cierto? No me quiero alargar como Oscar ahí, pero ¿en qué pensaba ahí, cierto? La otra, espere. La otra es ¿qué quería usted reflejar y qué quería usted mostrar? Porque yo veo una cosa, pero el artista puede mostrar otra. Yo interpreté algo y de alguna manera quería mostrar él interpretó de alguna manera otra cosa con la película, ¿cierto? Now in English, or I don't know if you can translate it.
I can translate.
Like,
He had
no.
two questions. One was that if I was inspired by a poet from Colombia, probably. What did I wanted to portray? What was my idea? And the first one I forgot.
That was
The other one, the primera.
You already asked him.
Yeah, if it was inspiration from poets like Quiroga or Jose Asuncion Silva, which is the one in the film. Well, I was mainly my reference was myself in a way, and this figure of the average person in Colombia or in my city, or because I think the generation in Colombia that lived the youth in the 80s and 90s in Medellin, at that time it was a very dangerous city, and we see often the drugs and stuff about Medellin, but there was a huge artist movement there, like in theater, in poetry, in music. They were so close to the drugs as well. It was like a collateral effect of that same issue, and a lot of those people were swallowed even by the bohemian life in a way. So, and there were such smart people doing art back then, and many of them were left behind or swallowed by that world in a way. So it was interesting how those guys who are now in their 60s were living off their memories. It's like a interesting thing for me to see that in my own city in a way. There's a lot of poets that I love from Medellin and from Colombia. Like for instance, there's a poet called Raúl Gómez Hatin, that he had a really difficult life, and he was amazing poet. And of course, Jose Asuncion Silva is very important. So important that he ended up being in the film. But at the end, ultimately, it was a film that I was thinking about myself in a way. I was just thinking about myself and how it was like if my fate was the same one as the previous generation, in my own city, and his slang is very from the city. I can see that he's from Medellin. Yeah. Thank you for.
We can do. Oh wow. Okay. See, look at you. Ask and you shall receive. I see a person back there in a burgundy.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Yeah.
I'm nervous, but if only Rodrigo they could see Medellin today. Rodrigo they from No Futuro. I found it very cool the striking parallel to Arragando Pueblo when they had the family talk about their poverty, and then Oscar's like disgust with what the other poet was doing, right? Continuing that cycle of porno miseria, right? And so earlier you mentioned that you made this film out of frustration for cinema, and so is that for the context of Colombian cinema or just like, I don't know, the imperialistic vulture of yeah. So what is your frustration with cinema? Sorry.
Well, yeah, she mentioned two big important films from Colombian cinema tradition. One is Rodrigo de No Futuro, which is a film from the 89, 90. It was kind of like the first film that showed Medellin to cinema in a way. And the other one was Agarrando Pueblo, which is translated like Vampires of Poetry, of Poverty, which is a film that deals with sort of the same issue of how we export our themes to the world. This film was, if I'm not wrong, from the 70s. I'm not sure. Yeah, from Cali. I do believe when you make films, you don't. I'm not really thinking about making Colombian cinema. I'm just a person who's in love cinema and making films just for me, you know. But it's funny when you make that film, and then you start seeing yourself that you're part of a tradition, of a place in the world, and you're part of that, and you can escape from that because cinema is a reflection of life. You know, you need two things to make a film. Well, not like Godard says, like a gun and something like that. And you really need characters and scenarios, landscapes. And out of that, you make films. And for that, you need the characters and the landscape for the place you set your film. You can escape the tradition of that place. You know, you cannot escape the reality of what it is. And the concerns that I depict on the film, which are very personal, are the same issues that many of people like me have, you know, in a way. So it's like, that's why there's even those films that you mentioned, I mean, because those issues are still there, you know, in a way. And it's funny because in Colombia, when the film was on theaters, people were saying this very Colombian film, but I wasn't pretending to make a very Colombian film. I was just pretending to be a film with realism in my city. And the funny thing is the issues, like I have this uncle who is like the black sheep of the family. And it turns out that in Colombia, maybe everywhere, like we have like a relative like that, like the artist who is failing, who is the problematic, but everyone loves him. And it's not just in my family, it's everywhere, you know, like, but in Colombia there's a lot of things that are so ingrained in our traditions, you know, like, and without undeliberately you are there, you know, you just write a character and it's part of that tradition. You know?
Yeah, it's just so funny. We always try to imagine that we aren't what we eat, but we really are. Like no matter what I do, like I'm always like, you know, I'm cosmopolitan, but like somehow like some black church southern shit will end up in my plays every time. I'm like, fuck. I guess just that's 14 years of growing up in Virginia and going to church. Does anyone else have one last question? It has to be short. So, oh, who said that? Okay, great. Hi.
No, I didn't write them. I just wrote the last 2 poems from Weimar main, really, but it's because it was so difficult for me to find, and I don't write poetry, actually. I don't. I actually, I like poetry, but I don't know how to do it. I think it's so difficult, you know, and it took me quite a while to find the right poems for each part of it. And the last poem, I wrote those poems as a reference in the script. Like, I want the poem to say this. And I spend a lot of time with friends, with poet friends, like trying to create a poem that will suit the film and what I want to say in that particular moment. For those poems, I couldn't find it. They couldn't find it, so at the end I say, fuck it, I just keep these two because I can find but at the end I it was this idea of embracing the imperfection and stuff and sometimes you just have to embrace your own inability to write something. But I think at the end, that's what I wanted to say. It was important for me in the last poem, at the end of the film,
that I at the end I ended up liking it. You know, like I know it's not a perfect. I mean, I feel it's not a perfect poem in terms technically. It's not a perfect poem, but I like it. I like its imperfection. I like how it ends, and I had this idea like the sad poem, writing a happy poem. I couldn't find something similar, and it's just like that. I mean, it's just like I couldn't find nothing else, so I keep this, and that's it.
I found the last poem sublime. I really did. I was like, no, that's a poem. But also, I just want to tell you guys, so I read an interview that he did right before Cannes. If you just Google, like, interview a poet Cannes, it'll come up. And one of the last questions is about you and your in your producing like cohort, like your two best friends, like your DP and your producer, how you guys make these movies together. And like for me, that is like the world is on fire right now. Everything is ending. No one's paying for art. Studios won't save you. Neither will billionaires. They will just like actually harm your soul and make it harder to be free. And so I think like this movie is such a great model of what happens when you just hunker down with your friends and make a thing. I don't know how much that thing is going to cost. I don't know where you get the money for it necessarily. They went to Europe for some of it. It looked like, but like I just like go like find your friends, like find your people and make with them. Like that is the number one thing. And also when you see a movie like this, like I know everyone goes to Letterboxd and like tags it. That's fine. That's the whole thing. But also like post about it everywhere else. I know all these apps suck and like we're supposed to be striking. But like I want people to see this movie. So tell everyone about this movie and how much you loved it. And thank you so much for sharing.